Welcome to The Detail, the podcast that explores the business of design and the people behind exceptional spaces. Today I'm joined by Nicola George, founder of NGPM Ltd. Nicola's firm specialises in managing full residential renovations, everything from planning and structural works to interiors, gardens and finishes. If you're a busy homeowner planning a refurb and don't know where to start, Nicola is the person you want on your team. So, hi Nicola, thank you for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule to do this podcast. It's very much appreciated.
No problem.
I thought I'd start out by jumping into a bit of your personal journey, just to explain to people what you're about and what your company is about. So, you are now obviously working in project management and property renovations, but you did start out in public finance, that's correct, isn't
Project
it?
finance.
Project finance, yeah. And you had over 10 years doing that, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how did you find the transition from project management in finance and into residential?
It was quite a difficult transition, actually. So the timing was that I started off working in the city as a graduate, started off in corporate finance and moved over to the structured finance division. And however many years in power project finance. And then I worked for RBS, and I was on maternity leave with my second daughter when the financial collapse happened in 2008.
Right.
And although my division was okay, we were within the sort of the structured finance division where a lot of the problems were. And RBS were trying to get rid of people. Oh. So I talked about it with my husband. It had been quite difficult to manage with one daughter. My other daughter was 5.5 at the time, nearly 6. And we sort of thought, okay, well, maybe just take a pause, put my hand up for redundancy and see what happens.
Yeah.
And, Anna was 8 months old at the time, so I was still off and I wasn't going back for 4 or 5 months. And we were living just up the road. We've had lots of houses in this area, and
it's a lovely area, actually.
I do really like Crouch End. And we had completely gutted and renovated the house that we were in at the time, and we were looking at buying another one to do exactly the same thing for. And my husband sort of said, well, we did this one together, but I think you could probably do this on your own if you're at home. Why don't you do that and see what happens and see whether or not you can make a business out of it? And so 18 months later, we had rented somewhere else. We were renovating the house over in that direction. And we lived there, I think, only for 3 months. And we had the possibility of buying this place. So we marketed that and it went to bids, and there were 2 couples that both wanted it, and ultimately one of them were unsuccessful. One of them was unsuccessful. And they walked around the house and the wife said, oh, this is amazing. Who's designed it? Who's project managed it? I said, me. And she said, oh, will you do it for us?
Wow.
So that's what happened.
That's amazing.
We moved in here, and I ended up. They bought when they found a place. They actually bought it on the same street.
Yeah.
And that was a full basement dig out and a complete renovation, completely gutted. And it was about an 18-month project in all. Designed the kitchen, found all the finishes, did all the colour schemes, all the lighting, everything, and the garden. And a few months into that one, a local agent who I know quite well, estate agent, said, oh, I've got somebody else who's buying a place a little bit further down the road, still in Crouch End. Can you do that one as well? And that was a 1924 beautiful rendered, big plot, big garden, more sort of this kind of size. So I did that one at the same time. And since then, it's just kind of snowballed.
Gosh, that's amazing, really. So basically you were thrown in at the deep end, weren't you? And you just rolled with it.
Yeah, there was sort of a break of about 18 months, nearly 2 years, where I was just focusing on ours.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing that. So I set up as a sole trader initially. I didn't set up as a limited company until a couple of years later.
Yeah. And did you always describe yourself as like a project manager?
Yeah.
Because really you're kind of a bit of design as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else you call it, to be honest. The way I would explain it to clients is that I step into their shoes. So I run, the legal term I think is contract administrator in the contracts that we use. But I'm their eyes and ears on site. I make sure that they're getting what they pay for. You know, I check all the invoices. I make sure that everything is fairly invoiced and, you know, reasonable quality and everything else. And I basically do what they would do if they had the time or the confidence to do it.
That makes perfect sense, yeah. And also someone that knows how to do it and is going to look after it and are going to have your back for you, basically.
Yeah.
And deliver you something that's value at the end of the day. Yeah. That's what you're doing, isn't it? Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I can't believe that you only stayed in that house 3 months and then moved on to another one.
Yeah, so it was delayed. We had terrible problems with the drains in the front garden, and we ended up moving in because we couldn't afford to rent anymore. So at one point in that house, I had a 2-year-old or an 18-month-old and a 7-year-old, and we had one nice bedroom and a bathroom, no kitchen. I had this tiny little milk fridge and a microwave and Corex everywhere. It was dusty all the time. I think maybe an iPad at that point. They were around by then. Well, we finished it. And then, this came up and it was like,
you're brave, aren't you? I can understand why. It's amazing, this place. So was property always an interest to you? Or was it literally just that you were in a transition with your professional life and obviously you were on maternity leave when you fell into it? Or was it something that you were always interested in?
I've always been interested in it. My dad was a builder and my parents were always renovating. They never actually finished because that's the sort of archetypal build as a house. And my educational background is in geography, and although I did a BSc, so it should have been more physical geography, I really like sort of built environment stuff. I was never really interested in town planning per se, but I like old buildings. I love period features. That's my. If I had my time again, I'd have done a history degree and maybe a history of architecture. I didn't know that existed at the time. My kids will tell you that we go to museums and we look at sort of historic costumes or whatever. We're members of the V&A, and I'm there taking pictures of cornices and doors and panelling and that kind of thing. And I've always really loved that sort of thing. Yeah. So, and I've forgotten the question now. So
no, that was it. So basically, that's how you've always kind of been into architecture in a roundabout way.
Yes, yeah. And both my husband and I, before we got together, we both had a property. He'd done a lot of work at his place. I'd done a reasonable amount. I didn't do any sort of extension or anything, but I'd done quite a lot of decorating and sort of designing around what I had on a low budget. And it's sort of a hobby for us both, really. That's what we like to do.
Yeah, same for me actually. My dad's a retired builder. He used, before his glass company, he used to do. So I spent my weekends as a kid on building sites. Yeah. But now I'm forever doing up houses as well. So it's a bit of a curse and a blessing, isn't it? But
well, when kids are in junior school, at some point they have to do some kind of map of their house or their bedroom or this sort of thing, or drawing of their bedroom. And my eldest, when she did it, I think she was 6 or 7, she was drawing floor plans because that's what I kept showing her.
Oh, so she's going to be an architect.
This is going to be your room. This is going to be your room. No, she's an art historian.
Oh, is she? Wow.
This is where you're going to have your reading area, and this is going to be this, this is going to be that. And she drew her own floor plan.
Oh, bless. I was always trying to tell my mum and dad how to do their bedroom. I think should have this kind of wardrobe, that kind of bed.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, can you remember the first renovation you were paid to manage, and was it exciting or terrifying? But you've kind of already answered that, haven't you, really? Was it terrifying or exciting?
Exciting. There were a few. Yeah, it was a basement. So I did, on that one, although the builder that I was using at the time could probably have done the basement. He wasn't a basement specialist, and I ended up using a basement specialist for that. And it was the right decision because there are always going to be problems. I think I would have been way more nervous if it had been sort of a normal builder doing it, just in terms of structures, process, how you dewater when it's an issue. You know, if you're a basement company, you do this all day long.
Yeah.
It was exciting. It was hard work, very hard going. And I sort of was structuring my day around small children. So I sort of used to say to clients, I'd be around from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. I can meet in the evenings, I can meet at weekends, but that's my sort of rough working day. And it's quite a lot to fit in. Fortunately, both the sites that I was working, well, there was 3, there was another smaller one, again, in Crouch End, were very local. So I didn't have lots of travel time and stuff. And that's changed over the years. But yeah, I'm a bit, even with problems, I tend to sort of mull stuff over and I won't be pressured into making a decision. You know, if you need an answer right now and I haven't got all the information, I'm not in a position, then the answer's no. I need to go away and think about it. And you have things like go and refer back to a structural engineer because having done trial pits and stuff, for whatever reason, what we were expecting to build isn't what we can build because of site conditions or whatever else. So there is a process and it might add a week or so to a schedule, but you've got to go through that. So it's just kind of being able to step back and say, okay, the bigger picture is this. Yes, we're under time pressure. Sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't, but let's do it properly. And it's not being panicked into making a quick decision or trying to cover something up. It's making sure that the engineer's on board, the architect, if we need him, building regulations, everybody's aware of what's going on when you do hit a problem.
So NGPM has been, no, that's wrong, is it? NGPM has been going for over a decade now.
Yeah, longer than that.
Was it 2008 you launched, was it?
Probably 2009.
Oh, right,
yeah,
okay, yeah.
yeah.
Have you found that your projects have changed in their nature since the first ones, or have they kind of continued on an even heel and you kind of refined your what you're good at and what you're not good at?
It's really varied, actually. So every client is different. And although I'm pretty experienced now at working on listed properties or Victorian terraces, which a lot of the areas that I work in are, that's the main housing stock. I do a range of different types of projects for clients that, some of them are landlords, they own a house or they own a flat and the property needs an upgrade or they want to reconfigure it so they can get an extra bedroom in or something like that. And then with those, I tend to manage the properties as well afterwards.
Oh, right.
So we have sort of a slightly separate element to the business where we look after existing tenants and manage any issues that go on during the tenancy. I think probably the types of clients are the same. They're usually busy professionals who have the money to employ somebody like me, but don't necessarily have the time to dedicate and project manage themselves, or just don't want to, or aren't competent enough to do so. And the types of buildings that I've worked on, I think the youngest building I've done was built in the 1950s. Did that a few years ago, just before lockdown. The oldest building, I think, is about 250 years old, a Grade 2 listed place in Hampstead.
Is that complicated?
Yes. From
a lot of hoops.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of sinking.
Oh, God.
And had a specialist structural engineer there who is, he lectures still. He's a very experienced professor, but also practices as a structural engineer. And that was incredibly interesting. We found all sorts of things in the house as we sort of had to strip back.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was built in the crossover between the building technology on wood-framed buildings and brick, coming in for more sort of everyday people. Not the, Hampton Court was built in the Tudor times and that's brick.
Yeah.
But for most people 250 years ago, houses were timber framed and sort of shiplapped. And this building has 5 or 6 courses of brick. And then every so often there's a piece of wood. And there's no real reason for that other than they weren't sure that the brick would do its job kind of thing. And over time, that wood has got wet and sunk a bit, and the foundations on it were in very bad repair. So that was challenging.
Yeah,
but all the while trying to retain as much of the fabric as we could.
Yeah, and the character.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. But yeah, like they are a bit scary at the grade 2 listed renovations. Lots of hoops to jump through. Complicated.
Yeah. I mean, on that particular one, I kept very detailed records of everything that went on. And I had one of the issues that came up was there was a through lounge, and that, I don't know when it was opened up, but it was opened up without any structural know-how. So the floor above was bowing, and we needed to work out how to do that. And that was quite tricky.
Yeah.
But again, I'd established quite a good relationship with the conservation officer, and there was lots of toing and froing, and we got there. But that can be challenging with buildings like that.
Yeah. Well, in that case, it's good, isn't it, to have good relationships, like you said, with the conservation officer, because if you have a nice working relationship with him, then you can collaborate, can't you? Yeah. And also, like you said, you had a very experienced structural engineer and yourself who knows how to manage projects. So yeah, dream team.
Well, yeah.
So who else is involved in the company now, or the business, and how do you split responsibilities? Is it just yourself, or is it?
No, I have a colleague, Phil. He's upstairs in the office at the moment, actually, keeping things spinning. He's worked with me, I'm going to say 9 or 10 years now, and he's great at basically filling in the gaps. So I tend to be very much the sort of client-facing early on, and jumping through the hoops and managing the problems and stuff. And Phil kind of assists me in doing that. So, for example, a job that we've got at the moment, which is really in sort of decorative snags, he's on that most of the time, managing the bits and pieces. Where it's the engineering and the architectural stuff, or dealing with planning or neighbours or party wall or that sort of thing, I tend to do most of the sort of the more client facing bigger stuff. But Phil does a bit of everything, and he's very good at numbers. Yeah. So I can do spreadsheets, and I do spreadsheets, but my preference is not to. So he looks after. We do like a valuation spreadsheet for every project, and that involves doing a detailed specification. So everything is costed as part of the contract. And then as we go through the stages, we'll ascribe a percentage of completion, which throws out the number that is a reasonable invoice amount. And Phil keeps track of all of that. And obviously there's always changes and additions and whatever. So that's one of the things he's very good at.
Yeah. Oh, that's good then. So you kind of split the roles using each of you to your strengths, really, and what you enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, we're complementary. I would say that, he can do a large amount of what I do. I can do everything that he does because I've always done it until he came along, kind of thing. I suppose the thing is that it's my name above the door, and clients want and expect me to be an integral part of the project.
Yeah, that's understandable. It's like if you go to Vidal Sassoon, you want Vidal to do your hair.
Well, not good. Yeah.
So you offer a full service of layouts to furniture and fittings. Can you give us an example of what a project beginning to end looks like?
Yeah, sure. So I generally get involved when people are starting to think about what they want to do. So either they've been in a house for a long time and they want to extend and make some changes, or they're in the process of buying it and they know that they want to do a big renovation and maybe some sort of extension. Because I'm not a trained architect, I will manage the process with an architect and the engineer. But a lot of the time, at the very beginning, I will do floor plans with a client and spend quite a lot of time understanding their design aims and providing options on what I think would work with the space that's available or within the sort of planning constraints that we may have. Yeah. And do, I wouldn't say simulations, but it's kind of a walk around of what it could look like. I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I don't use any of those wonderful sort of 3D visualizations that architects do that. Yeah. But I'm quite good at marking out ground and, you know, being able to look at something and say, well, you haven't got enough room for that because this is 60 centimetres and this is, and I can do that all visually. I mean, obviously I would measure, but I can see a space, and I find it quite easy to visualise it in 3D, which a lot of people don't find particularly. My husband is one of them. So that's the sort of the initial get to know the client. What do they want?
Yeah, where are you going with this? Yeah.
Show me some pictures, show me a Pinterest board, show me the sorts of things that you like so that I can start to get an overall picture. And then if there is building works to do and structural works to do, the client engages architect and structural engineer directly, but I will manage that process and I will be the sort of principal contact. Doing the iterative design with the architect and kind of reviewing planning docs and that sort of thing. And also questioning the sense of the structure, you know, the structural engineer. I'm not an engineer. I don't know their job and I don't presume to be able to tell them their job. But I will say that in some circumstances, an engineer will do what's easiest but has quite a significant design impact or build impact. And I will sometimes query, well, is there another way of doing this? So, for example, on a project that we did a little while ago, there was talk of underpinning a party wall. And we were only really replacing the existing single-storey structure. So it seemed very heavy-handed. We didn't have a fantastic relationship, or my client didn't have a fantastic relationship with the next-door neighbour. Party wall can add a lot of cost and a lot of time to a build process. And you have to be very careful and respectful of people's properties, right? You know, rightly so. So I sort of queried that and said to the engineer, is there a way around this? You know, if you built an inside skin on that wall and you went down to the normal foundation or the existing foundation, which I think is about a foot, does that give you sufficient comfort, given that you're not really adding any weight to that roof? You're not putting anything on top of it. And yes, it was doable. So it added a bit of time to the design process, but it made the build simpler, cheaper, and far less fraught with angst.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I mean, I did a renovation of a fantastic flat that overlooks the river in Putney a good few years ago now, probably 7 or 8 years ago. It was already built, but and it had the living kitchen area had this beautiful sort of curved panoramic view of the river.
Wow.
Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Windows all the way along. And there are pillars that sort of step in about a foot from the window.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah.
I'm sure there's a very good reason for it. And obviously on a 15-storey building, you need the support. But that really irritates me because from certain angles, your view is obstructed. And where I haven't done sort of 15-storey buildings, but where I've done the idea of where you do an extension and you're going out, not across the whole width, but you're going out, say, on one side of the property. I've done floating corners. So you've got folding sliding doors that go round the corner. So when it's all open, you've got that whole thing.
Yeah.
And it is doable. It takes a bit of extra thought. The quickest, cheapest way to do it is to stick a pillar where the support is needed. But it doesn't always give you the wow at the end of it. And that's the sort of thing that I find needs to be thought through early. It's not always, you can't always work around it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you can, but it's a vastly more expensive option. But that's something that I find I find it interesting in that process, and B, I like to make sure that we're getting the best design from it. And I'll go and ask from a layman's perspective. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but why can't we do it this way? It's always worth asking.
I mean, you see these fantastic skyscrapers and stuff, don't you? So you know it's possible. You just need
it just needs a slightly different approach, I think. And then, so once you've got the design, depending on the client, they may have a builder that they want to quote, which is fine. These days, and probably only in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't really want to work with the builders that I don't know. I've got a nice stable of builders who I trust and I know will do a good job.
Yeah.
And it means that, you know, I've got a relationship with them. I'm a repeat customer. I know I can deliver.
Yeah.
So we'll get a couple of quotes from that. We'll build up the spec. Phil will do the spreadsheet that says, you know, this is how we cost it. They'll quote. I'll do a bit of analysis and say, builders don't always quote exactly how you want them to. So there may be a bit of querying and trying to sort of compare apples with apples, discuss it with the client. They meet the builders. They make their decision. The contract gets drafted. And then once we start on site, I'm usually there. I promise the client at least an hour a week on site and an hour's catch up weekly with a report or whatever. In practice, I'm usually on site half a day a week, if not like 2 or 3 times during the course of the week. It depends on the stage. When, you know, if you're just prepping ground, I don't need to stand and look at you doing it. But if you're putting steels in the ground and it needs recording and there's problems, then I'm on site as much as is needed.
Yeah.
And then once you've built the shell, you've got your plaster boarding going up, your skims going up, all your first fixes have been done. Then is there any cabinetry, carpentry, kitchen design to be done? Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. The last project I did, we used a kitchen supplier, but I've designed kitchens quite frequently and had them made by a joinery company that I use. Same with windows, depending on the types of window. If they're straightforward sashes, fine. But the sorts of things here are more bespoke, so I use a company for that. And then flooring, again, I've got an idea of what the client's looking for. I've got a range of suppliers that I use as sort of a first stop. They don't always necessarily have what the client's looking for. I can make suggestions or I can go and find exactly what they're looking for. It just varies on a kind of project by project basis. And then with paint colours and stuff, I'll do samples and schemes if they want them, including things like soft furnishings, furniture, rugs, bespoke shelving, whatever they want, really.
So do you put together like a package, like a mood board or something where you show them these things, or is it just more a conversation that evolves as you're going?
It varies. Some clients find mood boards particularly helpful. I would say that I tend not to spend a vast amount of time on the presentation of mood boards. I have done it. I've done a couple of teenage rooms, and the girls particularly thought that was quite nice with pictures and stuff. What I tend to do is say, right, this is your universe of possibles. Here are the samples. Let's compare that to the kitchen cupboard and the paint and whatever else is going in the room. Yeah. So it is a mood board, but it's a more sort
physical, isn't it?
Physical, yeah.
I actually find it quite hard to work without physical samples because tones and things are so manipulated by computer screens and things like that, and printers. So I think that's probably the best way, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, Pinterest tends to provide a visual for the sort of thing that a client is looking for. But when you're actually choosing materials on site, if you choose a floor colour that doesn't quite work with a kitchen cupboard colour, it's always going to jar. And those are the things that you're never going to replace, or you need to live with them for a long time. Yeah. So I think you do need to look at physical samples. And the other thing is particularly with colours, I always, with paint, I've got a whole library of paint samples, and I'm not talking the little squares. These are ones that we've physically painted.
Oh, really?
Either A4 or A3. And I'll say to clients, let's leave them in the room. If they're living there, look at them at different times of the day and see which ones you like. If they don't live there and it's a building site, usually we'll stick it on the wall and let them sort of look at it over a couple of days so that they can start to get used to it. Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? Yeah.
How do you decide whether a client's right for you? Do you go through a bit of a process like that, or do you think to yourself when a client comes to you, are these a good fit for me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of bad experiences. One where it was very early stages, there were some, and this client was recommended to me by a previous client, and they weren't friends, but they had people in common. There were red flags very early on. One of the things is that this particular client wanted me to record every conversation that I had that was relevant to her property, whether or not she was there or whether or not I was on the phone or in a meeting or whatever. I introduced her to a builder, and I was at that point, I was with a builder, sort of, intending to work with this builder, who's a regular contact of mine and I get on with very well, and he's very good at what he does. But I also took another builder around who has got quite a big profile around here, who I know, I've never managed to work with him because he's always a bit more expensive than everybody else, but he's a very good builder and I would love to work with him. But I took him in, and this client had a basement done a while ago, and it was a lovely basement, but there'd been some sort of issue with the concrete floor. Either hadn't been left long enough to cure before a wooden floor was put down.
Oh, right.
Or there'd been some kind of minor leak or whatever, but the wooden floor had barreled.
Right.
And was uneven. And I took the builder downstairs and I just let the client speak. And she said, look, what do you think about this? How would you resolve it? And he didn't kind of do an instant, oh, this is terrible, this can be done by X, Y, Z. He sort of took a moment to consider what he was looking at. And he said, well, it's not actually as bad as you're saying it is. You could potentially sand this out. Is it solid wood, or is it engineered wood, in which case you've got 3 or 4 mil to sand out, but you might be able to sand it out. And then you maybe just replace the skirtings or whatever. Because he didn't give the answer that she wanted within a time frame that she was expecting, she erupted, and he basically ran out of the house and left me with her.
God. He's dealt with a lot like that then, hasn't he?
And I phoned him afterwards and I said, I can't believe you left me in there. And he was like, oh, my life's too short. And actually that was where I got to. I ended up giving her a specification, which is what I'd done to date. I didn't invoice her for it. I'd sent it to her, and for some reason she couldn't open it, or it was slightly corrupt, or I don't know what happened. But I got this very terse or tense email from her that was like, you've clearly sent me something that you don't want me to use, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, I haven't. I will bring you a memory stick round. And I took it round, and you could just see there was steam coming out of her ears. She was barely holding on to her civility. And I hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah, you've only tried to help her so far.
Exactly. And she was there was party wall issues, I think, on both sides. And my approach is always as collaborative as you can be with a neighbour who's not particularly keen on having the works done for whatever reason. She was over-aggressive with elderly neighbours, which I didn't like the thing of. So in the end, I said to the builder, look, I'm walking away from this one. If you want to do it, you do it. And I think he went on and did it. But he was in and out as quickly as possible. And I think in the end, it didn't end well.
Yeah.
I think he did the job as well as he could under the circumstances. And I think he left her with a very good job.
Yeah.
But of course she wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation subsequently, and he was like, yeah, life's too short to deal with people like that. So I'm quite good these days about kind of gauging whether or not somebody is somebody that I want to deal with.
Yeah. Do you agree a scope of works and a cost up front, or do you let the project progress and then that's kind of, does the client and yourself discuss the budget and determine what the realms are that you've got to work within, the parameters, or how does that work? Mostly, I would say, because we enter into it, not for every project, because if it's a relatively small project, if it's under £50,000 and I'm using a builder that I know very well,
so long as you've got a detailed specification and you've agreed a price, you don't necessarily need a contract. It's overkill to a certain extent. But usually the sorts of sums that I'm involved in managing on a contract would range from 250,000 up to 2.5 million. So for those sorts of sums, it's always a contract, and that contract is signed at the beginning. So by definition, a relatively detailed costing is agreed up front, and it's agreed on the basis of a fixed price contract. Now, that is, I don't think I've ever had a contract where the number hasn't changed either up or down for whatever reason. But those changes or those increases are usually either driven by a significant unknown in terms of site conditions, whereby you've got to change the build. So as I said earlier, with a structural engineer or architect or whatever, there's an issue.
Yeah.
Or the client has changed their mind, which requires architect, structural engineer and change to the build, or whether as part of the works that we're doing, they've decided they also want all the windows done, or, an extra building built in the garden, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very rarely do we stay exactly within budget, but I would say that in terms of the build cost, the physical build cost for what was originally contracted, we're usually pretty much on it. You might get an overspend of a couple of grand, but it's never significant.
Yeah.
The changes are always, we'll do this as well, or we'll do that as well.
Yeah. So when you, for example, you've got a project and you're renovating a whole house, I'm assuming that for you to compile your prices that you're passing on to the customer, do you go out and get quotes from every kind of aspect, and then you compile that into one figure?
I look at the project as a chunk of or a series of stages. And for each of those stages, I sort of allocate a rough amount of time in hours. And I have sometimes I'm employed hourly. I have an hourly fee range, depending on the sort of project. And I will do a rough calculation, say, right, well, that phase is going to take me 100 hours, that one's going to take me 5 hours, I'll charge this for it, I'll charge that for it. And that gives me a rough starting point. And then I look in the round on the project, the nature of it, what are the possibilities of changes and stuff, and I will adjust that. But broadly speaking, I take a view on this is going to be, let's say you've got a 12-month build, I'm usually involved 12 or 18 months earlier than when the build starts, and probably a good 6 months to 12 or 18 months afterwards, because we'll do completion folder, and then after the warranty period, we'll go back in and make good anything that's needed. I usually budget for between 5 and 20 hours a week on a particular project. Right. And it'll depend on the stage that project is in and whether or not there's issues. On a good run, I might be lucky and do a project in 10 hours a week, but it'll vary over the course of the thing. So if it takes me 30 or 40 hours one particular week because it's been an absolute nightmare, that's what it takes. Yeah. So I take a view on how many hours it's going to take. And then I also charge a fixed fee for sourcing. And what I do there is, again, I look at how many hours it's likely to take me. And again, that varies, but I've got a reasonable idea. So I will charge a client, let's say I'll spend 20 hours sourcing things and taking samples around, and I'll charge them for the cost of the samples, but I'll charge them for those 20 hours. And then if I get a discount, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. On most things it varies. So on some things like mid-market taps, baths, sinks, I get somewhere between 5 and 7%. For the higher end stuff, I maybe get 15 or 20%. On kitchens, depending on the supplier, somewhere between 15 and 40%. So it varies. But I will pass that whole discount through. Yeah. So my clients will get whatever price I'm being charged for it, and they see all the invoicing on that. I'm very transparent. And then my thing is, this is my quote, this is my fee, these are the stages. There's probably 6 or 7 stages. So we charge based on progress through the project, from sort of initial design, management of the planning or whatever it is, all the way through to build, snags, completion. What I say to clients is, unless you completely change the spec, there is no change to this fee. If there are problems, it's included. If you want to do, if you want to paint another bedroom in the house, that's fine. If you then decide that you've got this massive garden, you want to build another house at the back, then that's a whole different thing. Yeah. But I sort of take a holistic view that, give or take, I'm being paid what I think is a reasonable amount of money per hour for my skills. But I don't count, once I've started the project, I don't think I've ever been back to a client and said, well, if you want another meeting this week, it's an extra X. Yeah, so that's good, really, isn't it? You're kind of factoring it all in as your preliminaries or something? Yeah, because, one of the things that I don't like the idea of is one of the things that I've learned over the course of doing all this is sometimes it's worth spending a lot of money on something, but it's not always worth spending a lot of money on something. Where you're doing, for example, when you're doing a renovation for a tenanted property, you can get the look of something without having to spend 180 quid a metre on a tile. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's about knowing where to spend the money and where not to. Yeah. So if I'm taking a percentage turn on everything, so let's say on a kitchen, I get a 40% discount, but I only share 20% of that discount with a client, there is no benefit to me of advising the client that they don't need to spend that amount of money. Yeah. I feel like it would encourage me, and also, well, not like words, but the client's going to think, well, is she showing me that tap option, which is 200 quid, and that tap option, which is 1,800 quid, wanting me to buy the 1,800 quid because she's going to get a turn on that. Mm. And I don't like that sort of approach. I know, and I suppose, depending on, there's no right and wrong way you do that kind of thing, but it can be hard to put people in the eyes, can't it? I suppose if you've got to have, you've got to believe in what you're telling people is the right thing to do. Yeah, and I like to give good value for money, and I like the client to be able to. One of the reasons why you would employ somebody like me is, if you're doing a kitchen, what are the most important things to spend your money on? Yeah, a good worktop, an attractive functioning tap. If you're not going for hot water taps, boiling taps are quite expensive. But if you're just doing a sort of a normal kitchen, you could spend 200 quid on a very stylish tap, or you could spend an absolute fortune. Both of them are stainless steel. One of them might be made in England, one of them might be made in China. There is an element of, quality, but you don't have to be the lowest level of quality there. You can go for something that's reasonable, mid-market. And particularly if it's for a rental property, if it's going to last 5 years and it's 100 quid, or it's going to last 20 years and it's £2,000, clearly it's easier just to buy the cheaper one. Yeah. So it's about just make horses for courses, making sure that I feel like I'm giving good advice rather than margin-driven advice. Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of working. And like you say, it encourages transparency and good working relationships with people, doesn't it? So I know you mentioned earlier that you like to work with the same builder that you've got a relationship with. If you do you tend to, for all the trades that you use, do you tend to have like a go-to person that works in that area, right, for your kitchens, your building work, carpentry? Yeah, I like to work based on relationships. Because I like working with people that I can vouch for them in terms of the quality of their output, and B, that I know well enough to know, we've all got our quirks. I'm sure they would all say that about me. But if you know the animal that you're dealing with, it's much easier to manage the process in whatever form that is, And have I fallen out with anybody built like trades? Not really. There's been a few wrinkles here and there. But I like to be able to have a frank discussion that's based on trust and a level of relationship, rather than, I don't know you, I've only known you from this particular transaction, and I can't vouch for you. I can't say to my client, I've got a relationship with these people in terms of I've used them to supply or whatever over the course of many years. So yeah, I do prefer to have relationships, and I'll start new ones. And if a bit like my relationship with iSteel, tried you once, had a brilliant experience, needed you again on 18 months later or whenever it was, and used you again because it worked really well.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of wrinkles on the first site, and you guys were no quibble, came round, sent the right guy round and sorted out the problem.
Yeah, good.
That's what I like.
Yeah.
It's somebody that actually bothers to make sure that they've left a happy customer.
Yeah.
And is happy to say, yeah, okay, that's fine, we'll sort it.
Yeah.
Rather than, well, I've done what I've done.
Yeah. There's nothing worse, is it, than someone doing a service for you and then just blanking you completely and pretending it's not happening, because you can't move on, can you, and fix things?
Well, no. I mean, one of the things I do with the contracts is we always do a retention. So you need to pay a deposit, client needs to pay a deposit, and then you pay stage payments for everything really that's chunky, apart from when you're buying things.
Yeah.
But if you're dealing with any sort of trade or trade supplier, but I'll never let a client completely pay for everything up front, because that's not how it should work.
Yeah. Very dangerous, isn't it?
I've got a client in Hackney actually that this is the second job that I've worked, or the second site that I've worked for her on. And we're gearing up to do some quite extensive works early next year. But we had some windows replaced, and the company that we used, she chose, and their product is brilliant. But there's been a few issues. And I'm not saying they're not dealing with them, because they are. We are in contact with them, and they've been actually very good. But they don't quite know the solution yet. So in that case, we've retained, I think it works out to about 6 or 7% of the total amount that she is due to pay, and they will get paid when those issues are resolved.
That's fair enough, isn't it?
But that's the only way that you actually get comfort, that if there is a problem and somebody walks away, you've got, at least, it might not go all the way, but at least you've got something that says, okay, well, I can pay somebody else to do that.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's how it should be, really. And that's how you get people to keep the promises, ultimately, isn't it? So, and make sure your customers are getting the value for money. So, was it hard to find reliable tradespeople in the early days? Have you just been very lucky, or have you built those relationships steadily over the years?
A bit of both, really. Because I'd done my own renovations, I had a builder who, for many years, was very good for my business. Unfortunately, nothing to do with me, but he got himself into trouble, and on another site, I believe, and ended up disappearing.
Oh, really?
That was a really bad experience. I mean, to be fair, he hadn't left any significant issues on the site that was live at the time. There were a couple of minor things, but he basically disappeared. I've never seen him since.
Oh, really?
Never seen him since. And this is a guy that I would have considered a friend. He had asked me to be the executor of his will.
Wow.
We had a relatively close a sort of friendship and business relationship, and he disappeared off the face of the earth.
Odd. Very odd.
Yeah, I think he went to Brazil.
Oh, really?
His girlfriend was Brazilian.
Oh, right.
And I think what he was doing was, he was not necessarily in a bad way, but the money that he was making, he was channeling, because they were building a place in Brazil. And I think he over-channeled and didn't leave enough here to sort out what he would normally have done, kind of thing, and just decided to go. So that was a bad experience.
But not on your project, was it?
It was, it was,
right.
I mean, no, there wasn't, there were a few minor things that needed sorting.
Yeah.
But I got somebody else in to deal with them, and the client didn't lose any money or anything, so it wasn't an issue. But it left quite a nasty taste in my mouth.
Yeah, especially if you worked for him for such a long time.
Yeah.
What's your favourite part of the job? What keeps you motivated?
I really like the beginning, where you're getting to discuss the design aims and how a client wants to use a space, and how I sort of will walk around the property and can kind of envisage what it's going to look like. And then I really like the end.
Yeah.
Where I get to and I think, actually, yeah, that's pretty much where I expected it to be. The middle bit gets a bit knotty.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the minor snags. You know, one of the things that we're pretty good at is attention to detail, and I can do that, but I tend to get Phil to do a lot of that because I'm kind of conceptually it's already done. He's very good at the detail of it, and I'm sort of thinking, right, I'm probably moving on to the next one. I'm still around, I'm still available, and I will roll my sleeves up on that, but Phil's perfectly capable of doing it, so he will do a lot of it. So yeah, it's really the beginning and the end are the best ones. Yeah,
the nice bits.
Being invited to a party that someone's having to sort of house warm, or
you let Phil do that one, do you?
being invited to dinner by clients who have sort of become friends, and you know, that kind of thing's lovely. Yeah. Getting a recommendation or a sort of testimonial is always lovely. But yeah, the start point and the finish point and and I'm rubbish at taking pictures. I really am. So usually it's sort of a bad before and a nice after because Phil's taken it.
Yeah.
But that's quite satisfying. That's probably the most satisfying.
Do you have a favourite part of the job? I know you said you really like doing the floor plans, but you also like the bit where you go in and talk about the ideas and the bit at the end where it's all a nice finished project. But is there a specific bit that you do that you really love doing?
Yes, and that would be, and it doesn't happen on every project, that would be preservation and conservation of existing period building fabric. So on a Victorian property, for example, if where possible, you can retain an original cornice or the original doors or the original fireplace, floorboards, anything that's what I would say are the bones of a house. Being involved on a listed property, it's a completely different business, and it's amazing to sort of see what the real specialists can do. But it's about preserving a history and then making that history and that space usable for a family in a modern context. That's a lovely thing. Being able to sort of have echoes of a particular style, be it 1950s or 1920s or Victorian or Georgian, to echo that, but to sort of modernise it for a family living.
Being sympathetic and respecting the integrity of the building, isn't it? Because so often you do see, in my opinion, bad projects where someone's gone. It's usually people that are not professionals at it and are doing it themselves, but they take out everything that made the place characterful.
That really upsets me. I've been into a place around here. This house is a bit older. This predates when the trains came, but most of the houses around here are sort of 1880s to kind of 1920s, which is when the area was really developed. And I've been in a beautiful 1880, 1890s terrace house, big, sort of split levels. So you've got kind of 4 floors, maybe a basement. And there was a beautiful old wooden staircase. Someone's ripped it out and put a glass and wood structure in. That just jars. It just doesn't look right. So it's about maintaining the character of something, maintaining those details, and then, like you say, echoing them through into modern living and making them a backdrop rather, not everybody likes heavy Victorian architecture or whatever, and that's fine. But you can use paint techniques and lighting techniques to soften some of the features if you don't like them and still use them.
Yeah, because no one's saying you can't do a glass staircase. It's just the context of it, isn't it? Because ultimately, if you have got like a Victorian building, for example, and you open the door and all of a sudden there's like, I don't know, very modern, contemporary. It doesn't always work well, does it? Unless you've got the balance right between the two.
No, I mean, there's a house up the road that was very expensively renovated, not by me. And I happened to get a look in on it. And the shell is Victorian, but nothing else is. Like the original floor plan's been completely ripped out, and it's all, it's not my passion. It's not what I like.
I've got a friend, actually, this is going a bit off subject, but she's she bought quite a big apartment in Wimbledon, like the top floor of an old house, a bit like this, but she's got the top floor basically. And she's about to embark on a big project. I think they just want to rip everything out and make it really contemporary. And I'm saying to her, you should keep that nice arch and things, and make it work. And she's like, she's kind of taken on board what I'm saying, but because her dad's sort of managing the project for her, or loosely managing it, she's kind of just like, oh, I don't really know what the right thing to do is. But yeah, I think it'd be such a shame if they take out everything that's nice about the place just to make it a bigger.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to, go big for the loft.
Yeah. I mean, lofts are slightly different. I think so. One of my real bugbears is putting features in where they just shouldn't be there, or where they're completely anachronistic. And for example, in a loft, normally in a tall Victorian terrace or a semi, that would usually have been where your maid of all works, or a nursery nurse or whatever would sleep. You wouldn't have had cornice round the eaves and that kind of thing. You probably have plain banisters, like sticks, rather than the ornate ones that you've got down in the bottom, sort of the entrance of the house, which is the grander part of the area. Putting stuff into those rooms where it shouldn't be is also wrong. So in a loft, for example, if you're renovating, or if you're trying to extend up into a loft, you're going to lose a bit of the character of an attic, but it is just an attic. Usually they'll do a dormer at the back, wouldn't they? So what's important there would be making sure the windows match the rest of the house, rather than putting UPVC windows. I have a severe loathing of UPVC windows on period properties. I'm not saying that they're not a good thing from an energy perspective, but they for me, they change the face of a house.
I know,
And if it's a period building, it needs period features, kind of thing.
Even sometimes you get PVC ones, and generally speaking, if you have to, which I do, by the way, I prefer them if they're like linear, like free, sort of. Whereas some people seem to want a little window there, a little window there. Things like that really annoy me, because they draw an emphasis on a complicated design that's not very nice, in my opinion. But
I can't deal with stuff that's wrong. So I've been into a place before, and it's a 1930s house, and it's got a Louis the 14th repro fireplace. No, it's just wrong.
I know,
I don't
There's some odd things in the world, isn't there?
I just, 1930s houses are not my favourite in terms of look. But if you're going to have one, so the place that I did up the road was 1924, so it is kind of edging towards 1930s, and it had some sort of deco suggestions in it. So that's what we did. The fireplaces that we put in were either Art Nouveau or Deco, so it all kind of fits in with the time. And we did herringbone wood, traditional solid wood flooring, and the bathrooms are all reclaimed 1930s basins, toilets, and baths. Cool. And the taps, we didn't go to the expense of having old taps refinished, but we found some that were the right kind of. And it's just about you don't have to be super over the top about it, but it's lovely to have those nods in where they look right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes all the difference ultimately to things looking balanced on whether they should be or shouldn't be. So I'm guessing that when it comes to materials and finishes, you kind of literally, like you just said, you'll go to a project and you'll assess what that project likely requires and what your customer's kind of going for, and then you'll make that decision. It's not like you have a party trick of options and you just roll them out across the board.
No, I'm very sort of site and client specific. I've got some trusted sort of go-tos for bathroom renovations. I use, and it really is sort of depends on the nature of the product. So if we're sort of super high end, then there are names that I would use for that. If we're looking for kind of good stuff, but not ridiculously expensive. There are names that I would use for that. And then if you're looking, okay, this little downstairs loo in a development, it doesn't need to be vastly expensive, it just needs to be sturdy, different ones. And there are, I've done a lot of bathrooms previously where I've gone for kind of a basic beige tile and not tiled the whole room. A lot of people will tile a whole room. I think that's too much paint. Yeah. You can get away with some paint. You just need to tile the bits that need to be waterproof, kind of thing. And just use one tile and made sure that where you go up on a wall, the grout matches, you know, so they're all in line.
Yeah.
Or similarly, I've done a lot of floors where I particularly liked a grey tile that I used for a long time. And this is porcelain rather than stone. Because those are the sorts of things that it's very difficult not to like.
Yeah.
So if you are, you know, if this is, let's say it's not a family house, it's I want to be here. This is my first stepping stone, which I've done as well. This is my stepping stone. I'm going to be here for 3 or 4 years. I'd like to develop it and make some money out of it. But I also want to move on at some point. Okay, well then if you want to move on, what you don't do is put loads of quirky stuff in and very super colourful and stuff that isn't going to appeal to the majority of potential buyers going forward. And it doesn't need to be bland, but if you can make it least offensive but stylish at the same time, then you're maximising your value. Not necessarily maximising your value. You are maximising your market reach. Yeah. So it's going to appeal to the broadest section of the market. Yeah.
You specified iSteel doors now on a couple of your projects that I'm aware of, and hopefully we'll continue to build that working relationship. Especially I liked the one you did. It looked like a big posh apartment. It had like the bronze sliding doors. Can you remember that?
Yeah.
That was really nice. How did you discover iSteel, and what drove that kind of interaction? Did you have something in your head where you wanted luxury steel doors, or did the client drive that? How did it come about, the relationship with iSteel?
So on that particular project, it was 2.5 years on site, massive project. We built a house in the garden.
Wow.
Sort of a bungalow effectively, but a garden house where there's an office and a kitchen, living area and a bathroom.
Yeah.
And then we also built a gym in the garden, re-landscaped everything, and then moved down, extended the main house outwards. So the living and kitchen areas at the back of the house were quite dramatically increased in terms of space. And the client on that one actually has a brilliant eye. A lot of the finishes that we ended up going for was where she'd seen something and was showing me, you know, this is what I want it to look like or whatever. And she has got a very good eye, and it's a very elegant, stylish house with expensive finishes, but it all just works really well. I mean, the kitchen is amazing, and those doors are facing the kitchen. So off the kitchen, we've got what they call the den, which is a large living room that goes out to the garden as well. Kitchen goes onto the garden. And then towards the front of the house, there is a window to the front, but it's sort of to the side because the front door kind of partly steps in front of it, is dining area, dining room. And,
which was gorgeous, by the way.
Yeah, both of them really beautiful. And I think with the den in particular, the idea was that they wanted the space to be usable at different points in the day by different members of the family. So, you know, the younger child, I think, is 11, maybe nearly 12 now. And he might have finished his homework and he's in the den with the door shut watching TV, but he's still sort of visible and everything else. Whereas the older child is almost 18 and may still be, or maybe popping down to get something or have a friend round or whatever. So it was about functionality of that space.
Yeah.
And there were 2 companies that I looked at, and yours was one of them. I will see if I can find that name for you, because I said I can't remember it at the moment, and I will see if I can find it. And I spoke to both of you because I'd spoken to other suppliers about Crittall doors, but I hadn't found what I was looking for, which was your solution, which is an elegant, bespoke version of a crittle door, and that's really what I was after. So I want, when I'm involved in designing something like that, I want to know how thick the stiles are. I want to know how thick the window bars are. I want to know what flexibility I've got. You know, have you got 3 types of handle, and that's all I can have? And if it hangs over the side and I can see it through the glass, does client like that or not?
Yeah.
Because this particular project was a 1920s house. We do have, it's not the one I was talking about earlier, but we do have nods to the deco feel throughout. And it was about respecting that architecture and providing something that was elegant. I did get a quote from a supplier that does the normal sort of external crittle doors, but the profiles on those are, as we were talking about earlier, they're too chunky.
Yeah. It's not the same, is it?
It's not the same.
It's fine on external, but internal, it's just too...
I think it depends on the style of the house.
Well, yeah,
if it's a very modern place, and you've got sort of chunky stuff going on elsewhere, I think it could work. Yeah. But in this particular instance, it didn't. And I didn't... The other thing was the colours that were available for the finishes, for the sort of the frames of the doors. Black is very stark. Yeah. And where you've not used black in other contexts in that space, it would have felt very heavy. But not everybody that I spoke to was capable of doing more than a kind of maybe 2 or 3 different options. One was a charcoal, the sort of RAL
70126 or something, is it?
7016 or 7015, yeah, that's what everyone uses. So your ability to kind of give me a rough idea of what was available, send me the drawings, and then for me to say, okay, well, can I have this or can I have that? And then send me a range of samples. And I looked at it on site with the client in different lights. I think we came up with 2 or 3 different ones. But it was a sort of goldy bronze that we ended up using. And it was light enough not to feel sort of looming in either of the rooms.
Warm, it was warmer.
Warm, but also kind of toned in with, so for example, on that particular kitchen, I think we've got, the island is porcelain. Yeah. And it's kind of marble effect. Have you seen pictures of it? Yeah. It's beautiful.
It is really nice.
And the kickboards are sort of, dull-toned gold.
Ooh, nice.
I'm not sure what you call the colour, but they are metallic of some description. And I didn't necessarily want to go gold because that would be a little bit too much and maybe slightly airporty, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But the similarity of the finish with the rest, so it tones in well, just works really well. And it works from both sides of the room. You know, the den is a bit more modern. It's got cornice. It's got lovely bespoke timber flooring, and now it's got a full sort of TV unit across the wall. But the sofa in there is sort of an L-shaped, quite modern style, but it doesn't jar with those doors from this side of the den. Yeah. And from the kitchen, it just works perfectly. Yeah. So it was that sort of trying to find something, and they're big doors as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, I think it was quite nice that you went for, I think it was textured bronze, wasn't it? Or was it anodized bronze? But anyway, it was bronze.
Anodized, I think. I don't think
but I think that's a really nice, a brave choice, because the obvious would be to go black, I suppose. But like you say, it can be a bit harsh, especially if you've got warmer tones going on and metallics in your colour scheme. So going for a bronze, it's kind of got the depth to it, but also it's got warmth to it. And I think that's quite a clever choice. And also you went for sliding doors, which is space saving, isn't it? So it gives you a versatility with how you use the rooms and how you move around that zone. So no, I think, and it looks stunning. Obviously a very nice, simple design choice. A bit like you say, it's got a touch of the Art Deco about it, but in a contemporary way. So yeah, very well done.
Thank you. Well, it's your design as well, I suppose. But, on that, we looked at, I think, during the design process, it's whether or not, rather than just have the sort of rectangle panes that we ended up with, which I think looks wonderful and it's very elegant, we could have had some sort of chevron-y stuff there.
Yeah, you could.
And the ability to say to you, right, well, I don't like that handle. What have you got? What else can I look at? I don't want anything hanging out because we're sliding. Can I change this? And it was always, I think we can do that. Yeah. Or if I don't know that I can, I'm going to go away and ask, and somebody's going to
do something about
it. And it was that sort of iterative process. We had a couple of little issues at the end. You sent somebody else around. He was lovely as well. And it was just the whole door-to-door thing was exactly the sort of service and quality of product I'm always looking for.
Yeah. For people that are interested in your services and want to reach out to you and maybe get a quote or ask for your advice, would they do it for your website?
They can get my contact details off the website. Probably best to send me. I think there is an inquiry form that goes to info that we sort of monitor. But to be honest, send me an email and we'll have a conversation.
What's your email address?
It is Nicola, Nicola, at NGPM Ltd.co.uk.
Thank you. I'll put all this in the show notes and people can contact you that way, hopefully, for read through. But yeah, brilliant. It's been really nice to meet you and that lovely home you've got and all your advice and insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.